understanding. The next week, she was gone. Blood, cold, silence. The fire hissed louder. Elijah stood abruptly. Outside, the wind howled. He stepped onto the porch and looked toward the barn. A sliver of light flickered through a broken plank. She was still awake. In the barn, Ione sat by the stall, her shoulder bare as she worked to clean a wound across her collarbone. Her fingers moved with careful precision, dabbing a cloth soaked in water from the trough. Her skin was marked by small scars, burns, cuts, old battles. But one mark stopped Elijah cold. A tattoo, deep blue and faded with time, curled across the top of her left shoulder, a rising sun above a cedar tree. Elijah stared. He had seen that symbol once before, etched into an old book Clara had carried, an anthropology journal, a symbol of Comanche royal blood. It had been carved on war shields and painted on tents. It meant chieftain's bloodline. Warrior's daughter. She looked up, their eyes locked. You fought in the war? She asked, surprising him with the sharpness of her English. Yes, he said cautiously. You sighed. Ione nodded. Once, then slowly pulled her tunic back up. I did too, she added. Elijah blinked. You? I was 12 when they took our land. I fought with my father, not with guns, with silence. She stood brushing hay from her skirt. You bought a name, she said flatly. But I was never for sale. You think I am a savage, but I am daughter of Greyhawk, granddaughter of the Fire Seer. I led my people across the Snake River before your soldiers came with fire. Elijah took a step back, the truth settling in his chest like iron. You are not a prisoner, he said, slowly. No, she replied. I am what your people feared most. A woman who remembers. And she walked past him into the night. The wind stirred her hair like smoke. Elijah remained frozen, hands clenched. He had not brought home a broken thing. He had brought home a blade, a legacy, and something he could neither name nor send away. The days grew quieter, colder. Frost crept over the hills like a slow, breathing ghost. Ione built herself a small shelter behind the barn, a lean-to made from pine boughs and broken fence posts. She asked for nothing, took less. She did not enter the cabin again. She rose before dawn and vanished into the woods with her bow slung over one shoulder, moving like wind through trees. By mid-morning there would be fresh rabbit or venison, left at Elijah's steps wrapped in dry grass or strung from a birch limb. He never saw her kill, only the offering. Inside, Elijah carved wood in silence, fixed his saddles, repaired old railings, but outside he watched. She danced with the forest, moved through snow as if it parted for her. And yet, never once did she smile. That winter came early. By mid-November, the trees groaned under weight of white. Elijah gathered firewood, checked traps, and, often, without meaning to, found himself tracing the path Annie had left behind. One night, the snow fell heavy and wet. He stepped outside, breath clouding. The forest beyond the barn shimmered under moonlight, branches bending under burden. Then he heard it, a soft, rhythmic beat. Not footsteps, not wind. Drums. No, not drums. Feet, bare feet, beating against earth. Slow and ancient. He followed through the trees. He found her, Ione, standing in a clearing alone. Snow spiraled around her like ash. She moved in a slow circular motion, arms raised, fingers slicing the air. Her feet shifted with practiced grace, every motion sacred. She chanted softly in a language older than this land. Elijah's throat tightened. She was not woman, not ghost. She was something in between. He did not dare speak. He watched until the cold numbed his boots, until her chant faded into wind, until she disappeared, back into the forest like she had never been. He returned to his bed that night, but did not sleep. The next morning he found fresh herbs at his door, wrapped in hide, enough to soothe bone and fever. 3 days later, he needed them. The accident was stupid. A patch of black ice near the corral. One slip. The gelding spooked, reared, and brought its hoof down on Elijah's shin. The sound was wet and sharp. Pain screamed through him. He collapsed near the fence, half buried in snow, breath ragged, alone. Until she came. He did not see her arrive, only felt her hands firm steady. He spoke not a word, but moved with purpose, cut his boot free, packed snow around the break, dragged him with surprising strength to the lean-to, where a fire already smoldered. He heated water, ground herbs between stone, tore linen from her own bedroll. When he screamed as she twisted the bone back into place, she did not flinch. And then came the fire, not the one from the pit, but from her eyes. She knelt beside him as he faded in and out, pressed a warm cloth to his brow. The room spun. Pain dulled. Then her voice soft. Unsure. Do not die. His eyes opened. She was close, closer than ever. He could see the lines of old tears on her cheeks, the crease of a scar by her jaw. Do not die, she said again, voice trembling. Why, he whispered. Ione hesitated. Her fingers found his callous and shaking. Like her, she murmured. Like the woman in the snow. I heard her voice once, she sang. Elijah's heart pounded. What did she say? Ione looked down. Her lips parted. Even wild things come home when they love. The words landed like thunder. He stared at her, breath shallow. Where did you hear that? Ione looked away. She told the wind, and the wind carried it to me. And for the first time since Clarara's death, Elijah Brant wept in someone else's hands. The days that followed passed softer than snow melt. Not without silence, but the silence no longer felt sharp. It rested between them like a woven blanket, familiar and forgiving. Elijah started leaving extra portions at her door. Warm bread, cooked rabbit, strips of smoked trout. One morning she returned the favor with a jar of pine sap salve and 3 perfectly cleaned quail. They did not thank each other, not aloud, but every offering carried its own kind of language. By the second week of December, Elijah found her waiting outside the barn, a dull axe in hand. Fence is weak, she said simply. I fix. He nodded, handed her another blade. That day they worked side by side, replacing slats, resetting posts, hammering in cold silence. But when Elijah glanced at her blistered hands and handed her a pair of his old gloves, she took them without a word, without defiance. In the evenings, he started teaching her English slowly, one object at a time. This is sky, he said, pointing upward. She narrowed her eyes. No, sky is not that small. He laughed. Guess you're right. In return, she taught him how to read prints in the snow, how a rabbit hops, how a fox glides, how bear tracks press deeper. When afraid, you listen too loud, she told him once. Trees hear you before you see them. Well, I'm no ghost. She gave the smallest smirk. That's true. They cleaned out the old stable together, shoveled rotten hay, patched the roof with bark. Elijah found an old box of Clara's trinkets buried under the loft, buttons, dried flowers, a rusted harmonica. Ione did not touch them, but her eyes lingered on one thing, a thin silver necklace, simple, delicate. Hadley described dreams, Ione wrote, in which souls form selves and aliens shape their thinking. Clara's Ione picked it up, held it in the sunbeam like she was reading a story in its shine, then quietly placed it back. That night, the rain came slow at first, then hard, drumming on the roof like hooves. Elijah lit the lantern. The fire crackled low. He thought she had gone to sleep. Then he heard it, a melody, low, sweet, drawn from breath and memory. He stepped to the barn's open door. Ione sat cross-legged by the fire pit, the harmonica cradled in her hands. Her eyes were closed. The song was not perfect, but it bled. It bled like something that remembered. Elijah froze. It was Clara's lullaby. She had played it the night before their wedding. The night she whispered his name like a prayer. Now it returned through the hands of a woman who should not have known it. Elijah stepped forward. Where did you? But he stopped. His voice cracked, caught in his throat. His knees buckled. He sat down hard back against the stable wall, hands shaking. Tears came without warning. Years' worth. Ione said nothing. Huh, she said. She let the rain speak instead. When the fire dimmed and the storm thickened, Elijah leaned sideways, overcome by the ache in his chest. He pulled the old blanket from beside the feed barrel, but it slipped from his hand. Yanni stood silent. She picked up the blanket, shook it out, and knelt beside him. She placed it gently over his body, tucking it around his shoulders like Clara once had. Then, in a voice so low it barely escaped her lips, she whispered, even wild things come home when they love. Elijah's eyes flew open. He stared at her, breath shallow. His voice came out. Where did you hear that? Ione looked down, hands still resting on the fabric. She did not smile, but her voice held warmth. You asked the wind too many questions, she said softly. And then without waiting for an answer, she turned and walked into the rain. The days that followed the rain were heavy, with a silence neither of them dared disturb. Elijah had not asked again about the lullaby, nor the words she whispered, but he carried them like a splinter under the skin, painful, intimate, impossible to forget. It was Ione who finally broke the quiet. They were sitting beneath the cottonwoods, watching fog roll across the hills like breath from a sleeping giant. Ione had just handed him a pouch of dried herbs, her own remedy for his aching leg. I knew her, she said. Elijah turned. You, Clara. He said nothing, but his breath stopped. I was small, continued. 9, maybe 10. Our people were camped near the Missouri, hiding from bounty men. The snow came too early. No food. My mother was sick. She looked up at the trees, but her eyes saw something far beyond them. Boom. Night. We heard music. Strange, gentle not. From our people. I followed it. Elijah listened, heart pounding. She was alone. A white woman in a blue coat holding a harmonica and smiling like she had no fear. She gave me bread, sat with me. Ione's voice dropped. She told me words, English, simple ones. Said I had a strong voice. Told me I should learn to name what I wanted or men would name it for me. Elijah's throat tightened. Why didn't she tell me? She was not yours then, Anan said gently. She belonged to the wind, and the wind brought her to us. She taught you that phrase? He asked. Ione nodded. She said, it has a promise. Even wild things come home when they love. Said it to my mother before she left. Elijah stared at the ground, fists clenched. It was like learning your wife had lived an entire second life, one of danger, kindness, and secrets, and never said a word. She was more brave than you know, Ione added. She did not belong to the world she lived in. Neither do I. Before Elijah could speak, the sound of hooves shattered the stillness. A rider galloped up the path, dust spiraling. He wore a long gray coat, boots polished too clean for frontier roads. Ione stiffened. Elijah stepped forward. Can I help you? The rider dismounted, slow and confident. His badge glinted under the pale sun. Lieutenant Callow, he said, extending a gloved hand. U.S. Army. Elijah did not shake it. What's your business? Call smiled. I believe you've been harboring a fugitive. Elijah felt Ione shift behind him. Call reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a paper. Aim. Ione, accused of murdering 2 soldiers near Bitter Creek, escaped custody. There's a bounty, but I am not here for gold. I am here for justice. She's no murderer, Elijah said flatly. Callow arched a brow. You know her whole story, rancher. I know enough. Call stepped closer. You think she's some wildflower you can tame? Let me tell you what she did. She slit their throats in there. Sleep. One of them was 18. Ione said nothing, but her fists were tight. She defended her land, Elijah said. Kalos snorted. We all defend what we believe in, but the law does not bend for ghosts or savages. He held out shackles. Step aside. Elijah did not move. I said, she is not going anywhere. Elijah growled. Cal's smile vanished. His hand drifted to his holster. That your final answer? Cowboy. Hyene stepped forward suddenly. Enough. She held her hands out. I will. Go. No, Elijah said sharply. You do not run anymore. I am not running, she said quietly. I am ending it. She turned to Call. I will. Go. Call grinned. Smart. But just as he reached to clasp the iron on her wrists, Ione moved fast as wind. She spun, ducked, ran. Call cursed, and drew. Elijah shouted, no. The shot rang through the trees. Ione fell hard in. The snow, clutching her shoulder, red blooming across the buck's skin. Elijah ran to her, skidding to his knees. Ione, she gasped, teeth clenched. It is not deep. Call approached, gun raised. She's lucky I do not miss. Elijah stood, fury in his bones. Drop the gun, he said. Call laughed. You planning to shoot a federal officer? No. Elijah said, I steady. I plan to bury one if he tries to take her again. Call looked between them, gauging the fire in Elijah's stance and the rising sound of footsteps from the woods behind. Locals, ranchers, neighbors, men with pitchforks and rifles. The storm had found its, and Elijah had made his choice. The rain returned with a vengeance, slashing through the mountains as Elijah hoisted Ione onto his saddle, her arms slick with blood, her breath ragged but steady. He climbed up behind her, gritting through his own pain, and spurred the horse west toward the forest, away from law, from judgment, from everything that had tried to keep them apart. Behind them, Kalave Chase, his men shouting over thunder hooves, pounding against wet stone. The horse slipped once, nearly sending them tumbling. Elijah leaned forward, whispering to the animal like it was made of wind. Just one more ridge. Hold on. Ione clutched his side, fingers warm and sticky with her own blood. She did not speak. Lightning cracked overhead as they crested a rise and vanished into the old growth. Trees so tall the sky disappeared. Here, the trail disappeared. Here the land belonged to no one. Elijah veered off the main path, cutting through bramble and brush until the mouth of a stone outcropping appeared through the mist, a hidden cave cloaked in cedar. He dismounted, half carrying her through the entrance. Inside, the world was silence and shadow. She collapsed against the wall, breathing heavy. Elijah built a fire with shaking hands, coaxing life from damp twigs. The glow grew soft, golden, safe. Ione opened her eyes. This place, she whispered. This is where my mother prayed. Elijah looked around. The walls were etched with markings, lines, and circles faded from time, but still whispering memory. It's beautiful. Ione nodded weakly. She said this cave could hear what the sky forgot. She reached into her pouch, pulling free a small bundle wrapped in hide. Inside a feather, a pinch of ash, a tiny carved wolf. It is for death or return, she said. He knelt beside her. Don't speak of dying. Ione touched his chest. I must. There is a prophecy. When the man remembers the breath of the mountain, the dead will rise again. What does that mean? It means you were always part of this land, and so was she. Elijah swallowed hard. The fire danced in her eyes. And you? He smiled faintly. I am the breath. A crack of gunfire shattered the stillness. Elijah ducked instinctively, pulling her behind a rock. Shadows moved beyond the cave. Mouth. Kalos' voice echoed against the stone. End of the line, cowboy. You give me the girl, I give you mercy. Keep her, and I give you death. Elijah loaded his revolver. Then slowly, he set it down. Instead, he took Iani's bow. "Can you still shoot?" he asked. Iani's fingers closed around the grip. "I never stopped," he nodded. Then we ended. They moved like wolves through the trees, silent, fast. Elijah looped around using deer trails and old war tricks Clara had once read to him. Iani climbed above, blending into shadows. Callow and his men entered the clearing, torches hissing in the rain. Elijah stepped into the open. "You want me?" he shouted. "Come earn it." Call cursed. "Kill him." The soldiers fired. Elijah ducked behind a rock, then bolted through trees, leading them away. One bullet grazed his shoulder. Another hit a tree near his head. Still he ran. Iani struck from above. One arrow, then two. A soldier dropped, screaming. The others panicked, firing into the trees. Iani moved again, silent as storm wind, sending another arrow deep into flesh. Call roared, turning toward the cave. And that was when Elijah stepped out, bleeding, breathing hard, face pale as ash. "You came to haunt a ghost," he said. "Now you've met one." He raised the bow. Call fired. The bullet struck Elijah clean through the gut. He staggered, dropped to his knees, blood soaking his shirt. Iani screamed. She flew from the trees, loosing an arrow midair. It struck Callow in the chest just above the badge. He stumbled back, stunned, dropped his gun. Another arrow hit his thigh. He fell. Iani rushed to Elijah, dropping beside him in the ferns. No, you stay. You stay with me." He reached for her hand, voice barely a whisper. "You're the wild thing. And I came home." She sobbed, pressing her forehead to his. "You are not dying. Not here." He coughed blood, but smiled faintly. "Then pray, little wolf. Pray. The mountain remembers me." And they lay there, two hearts still beating, surrounded by rain and cedar and the echo of the old gods. Elijah drifted through a sea of shadows and smoke. Somewhere beyond pain, he heard voices, not English, not words, but low chants, rising and falling like wind against canyon walls. He tried to open his eyes, but the weight of death lay heavy on his chest. Then came the scent, either not, from memory, not imagined, real, alive, smoldering in the air like Clara's fire. Back in their first winter when she'd burned cedar to keep away ghosts. He gasped. His eyes fluttered open. He was inside a lodge, round and dim, the walls made of hide and woven pine. Smoke coiled through the roof hole above. Shapes moved in the blur, faces painted, hands pressing pick-uses against his side. He turned slightly and winced. But it was not pain that struck him. It was the sight. Iani kneeling beside him, hair unbound, face strewn with ash. Her hands hovered over his chest, trembling as she spoke in Comanche. The words were soft, steady, a prayer not of fear, but of asking. He could not understand, but he knew her voice. Then her words changed to English. "Clara," she whispered, eyes closed. "If you walk with the wind, then walk here. If your fire burns still, let it touch him. You brought me to him. Do not take him back." Elijah's throat tightened. Yanni looked up, sensing his breath. "Elijah." He reached for her hand. His voice cracked. "You prayed to her." She nodded. She was the bridge, the one who saved us both. The other faces around them withdrew, silent as shadows, leaving only firelight and the sound of rain on the height above. Elijah studied her face, strong, scarred, still carrying the weight of too many goodbyes. "You should have run." "I did once," she said. "Never again." He squeezed her hand. "You believed I would live?" Iani gave a small smile. "I believed in the cedar." They sat in silence. The fire crackled soft and steady. Then Elijah shifted, wincing. "How long?" 3 days, she answered. "Your blood stopped because the herbs sealed it. The old women say you are part mountain now." He chuckled, weak, but real. "Mountain doesn't bleed this much." Iani tilted her head. but it remembers. He looked around. Your people. She nodded. Some survived. We live far now. Quiet. But when the cedar burns, we come. Elijah stared into the flames. She burned cedar. Ione leaned close. Because she was listening. Before you, before me. Then Elijah turned to her. Tears in his eyes, not from pain, but from release. You brought me back. She touched his cheek. I brought you home. He blinked slowly, then whispered. You are my home. Ione's breath caught. In all her life, she had never been claimed. Without cage. Never been seen without fear. She closed her eyes, forehead resting against his. No more running, he murmured. No more ghosts, she answered. And the fire between them burned without smoke. Only warmth, only life, only the scent of something old finally coming home. 2 years passed. Like river mist, soft and certain. The old cabin was gone, burned down in a storm the spring after the blood and fire. In its place, Elijah and Ione built something new. A cabin of pine and stone, wide windows opened to the valley, and wind chimes made from antlers and old iron. Cedar logs lined the hearth. Wild flowers grew where bullets once fell. The people of Alorn had changed too. At first they whispered about the Comanche woman who returned from the dead, about the rancher who defied the army. But time softened their fear. Ione never asked for approval. She simply lived. Each morning she walked down to the schoolhouse, braids swaying, moccasins whispering across earth. Children waited for her. White Lakota half-bloods, forgotten by both worlds. She taught them stories, not just language. Taught them how to listen to trees, how to honor fire, how to say thank you without speaking. Miss Ione, one boy asked one day, do you believe in ghosts? She smiled. I live with one. Elijah watched from the porch most days, sipping coffee, the scars on his side, a quiet reminder of everything they'd earned. He planted corn now, fixed saddles, read aloud from Clara's old journals, which he finally opened and found full of wild beauty and quiet courage. He no longer spoke to her. Photograph. He no longer had to because in Ione's laughter, Clara echoed in the cedar smoke that rose each night. Clara blessed them, and in the breath of their new life, Elijah had finally learned how to live. On the second spring of their peace, they married. It was not a grand wedding, just a handful of friends, neighbors, children. Ione taught, old warriors who still wore feathers in their hair. They stood beside the creek, where Clara once planted seeds, tiny yellow flowers that now spilled like sunlight across the bank. Ione wore a dress stitched from deer hide and lace. Her necklace bore the silver ring Elijah had once carved from bone. Elijah wore his father's coat, and a blade Ione had sharpened herself. The wind moved gently through the cottonwoods as the elder raised his hand in blessing. Elijah looked into her eyes, breath caught. She held his fingers steady as always. Then softly, Ione whispered, even wild things. Elijah smiled, voice low and full of years. Come home when they love. They sealed it with a kiss, simple and full of memory. The valley breathed with them. That summer their son was born. They named him Cedar. He had his father's eyes wide and wondering, and his mother's stillness. He walked early, laughed often, feared nothing. By the time he turned 2, he rode a pony. Across the pasture, arms out like wings. One morning, snow dusted the fields in a quiet hush. Elijah saddled the mare. Ione lifted Cedar into her lap. Together, the three rode into the wide white, the mountains watching, the earth waiting. No path, no fences, sky. They rode across the same hills where Clara once wandered, where Ione had hidden, where Elijah had bled. But now there was no need to run, because love had built a home where none should have grown. And in the silence of that winter morning, where snow kissed the old cedar trees, one truth remained. Even wild things come home when they love. Thank you for riding with us through the whisper of cedar smoke, a tale of love that defied bloodlines, bullets, and time itself. If this story stirred your heart, made you believe in second chances, or reminded you that even the wildest souls can find home and love, then you belong here with us. Subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more powerful tales of forbidden romance, forgotten legends, and hearts that burn brighter than any fire. New Stories every week. Because where bullets missed, hearts never did.